I believed something for years. I taught it to people I trusted. I built a significant part of my own academic identity around it. And tonight, sitting here in my study at 2 in the morning, looking at a stack of ancient manuscripts I thought I understood, I have to admit something deeply uncomfortable. I was entirely wrong. I used to believe that as you get older, your convictions simply become sharper. I thought that maturity meant holding on tighter to your reputation, to your standing in the world, to the precise ways that other people perceive you. I honestly believed that aging was a process of cementing your authority and defending your intellectual territory with even more ferocity than when you were young. I watched my father, a brilliant and notoriously stubborn historian at University College London, start to change when he crossed the threshold of 60. For my entire life, our dinner table in London was essentially a battlefield of ideas. We would debate history, theology, the exact translations of ancient Near Eastern texts, long into the night. He was relentless. He always had to prove his point. He always had to win. His entire identity was wrapped up in being the smartest, most formidable man in any room he walked into. But then he turned 60, and something shifted. It was subtle at first, but then it became undeniable. He stopped arguing. I would sit across from him, armed with some new theory, presenting a counter-argument that I had spent weeks preparing, actively trying to bait him into our usual heated debates. And he would just look at me. He would smile slightly, take a sip of his tea, and say nothing. He would let me have the last word. At the time, I judged him for it. I thought he was losing his edge. I thought he was giving up. I sat there in my 20s, full of arrogant certainty, and I felt this strange mixture of pity and anger. I thought that the intellectual fire that had defined him, the fire that I had always admired and feared, was just burning out. I was angry at him for surrendering to age, but now I am 57 years old. I am 3 years away from the exact age he was when that shift happened, and sitting in my own study late last night, staring at the wall instead of the book in front of me, I had a jarring, physical reality check. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window, and I realized something that I have been actively trying to hide from myself for months. I am exhausted. I am so completely, fundamentally exhausted by the effort of pretending to care about things that do not matter anymore. Just last Thursday, I was at a faculty reception in London. A younger colleague, someone entirely convinced of their own emerging brilliance, trapped me in a corner near the wine table. They spent 45 minutes dismantling a minor, completely irrelevant theory about Bronze Age trade routes. 45 minutes, and I stood there. I nodded at the appropriate intervals. I made the appropriate sounds of academic consideration. I even offered a mild counterpoint just to show I was engaged. But inside my head, there was this screaming, silent void. I was looking at this person, watching their mouth move, and all I could think was, none of this matters. We are going to die, this building is going to turn to dust, and none of this matters at all. But I couldn't say that. The social contract of my profession forbade it, so I smiled. I kept the mask on, and when I finally got to my car, I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes in complete silence before I even turned the key. The sheer physical toll of that fake engagement was staggering. I find myself faking my way through social expectations almost every single day. I go to academic conferences. I stand in the hallways, nodding at conversations I have absolutely no interest in. I pretend to be deeply invested in petty departmental politics that feel entirely hollow. I listen to people trying to prove how important they are, and I smile, and I offer the correct responses, while inside, I am just drained. I feel this immense heavy burden of maintaining a performance. The performance of the engaged, ambitious researcher, the performance of the man who cares deeply about everyone's opinion of his work. And a terrifying question has been keeping me awake at night. A question I did not want to say out loud. Is it actually okay if I just stop trying to impress everyone? If I just drop the mask? If I stop attending the functions? If I stop fighting to defend my reputation? Is that giving up? Does that make me bitter? Am I becoming exactly what I accused my father of becoming? Is this just the slow, sad decline of a man losing his relevance? Before we go any further into this, I need to say something. If you are the kind of person who cannot let go of a question until you truly understand it, if you find yourself awake at night wrestling with exactly this kind of exhaustion, then this channel was built for you. Hitting the subscribe button tells the algorithm that you want more of these conversations, the kind of conversations we rarely have in public, because I have a lot more stories and texts that refuse to leave me alone, and I want you here for them. Let me take you back to 12 years ago. I spent over a decade researching ancient Solomonic manuscripts. I traveled across Ethiopia. I spent months in Israel. I sat in dusty archives in Egypt, and I went back to my mother's homeland in Nigeria. I was a younger man then, obsessed with uncovering the historical and spiritual roots of authority. I wanted to understand how King Solomon, the archetype of wisdom and power, structured his world. When you study Solomon, especially the texts attributed to him in his later years, you constantly encounter a very specific Hebrew concept. The word is zaken. It translates to the elder. For years, I read that word purely as an academic. I understood it as a sociological status, a title of power within an ancient community. I thought being an elder just meant you had survived long enough to sit at the head of the table and make the rules for everyone else. I thought it was about consolidating power. But reading those same texts now, at 57, with this deep, bone-weary exhaustion sitting in my chest, they read entirely differently. I opened the book of Ecclesiastes last night, chapter 12. It is a text traditionally attributed to King Solomon in his old age. The king who had everything, the wealth, the alliances, the unparalleled reputation. I will be honest with you. I almost closed the book after reading the first few lines. If you read it quickly, on the surface, it sounds like a deeply depressing, cynical poem about how your body breaks down and how life is ultimately meaningless. It uses these haunting metaphors. It talks about the day when the keepers of the house tremble, when the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those looking through the windows grow dim. It talks about the silver cord snapping, the golden bowl being broken, the pitcher shattered at the fountain. I read those words, and I felt a sudden, sharp knot in my stomach. I did not want to read a poetic, beautiful description of physical decline. I really didn't. Looking in the mirror these days already gives me enough of a reality check about my own mortality. Inside my head, I still feel 30 years old. My mind is sharp. My desires are clear. But the mirror tells a different story. The mirror shows the gray hair, the lines around the eyes, the undeniable proof that time is passing. I did not need an ancient king to remind me that my physical time on this earth is limited. I almost put the manuscript away. I almost decided that Solomon had just become a bitter, cynical old man who had lost his joy for life and wanted to drag the rest of us down with him. I thought, this is exactly what I am afraid of. This is the despair I am trying to avoid. I actually closed the book. I closed it, pushed it away, and stood up from my desk. I went to the kitchen and made tea, telling myself I was done for the night. I tried to convince myself that ancient wisdom has its limits, that maybe Solomon's wealth and power had just alienated him from normal human experience, that his words were not a guide, but a warning of what happens when you have too much. I wanted to dismiss him. It is always easier to dismiss a difficult text than to let it read you. I stood in the dark kitchen, holding the warm mug, staring at the streetlights outside. But the words wouldn't leave my head. The silver cord snapping, the golden bowl breaking, They were echoing in the silence of my house, and I realized I was not pushing the text away because I thought it was wrong. I was pushing it away because I was terrified it was right. I was terrified that my own golden bowl was already cracking, and I was spending my remaining time exhausting myself, desperately polishing the pieces for an audience that didn't even care, except that I went back to the study. I sat back down. I opened the book again. I sat there for 3 hours. The house was completely silent. The only sound was the clock in the hallway. I read that same chapter over and over again. I read it in English. I read it in the original Hebrew, looking at the root of every single word. And the more I read, the more the text began to shift. The more I realized that I had completely, fundamentally misunderstood what Solomon was doing. He was not writing a lament about the loss of youth. He was not trying to scare anyone about getting older. He was writing a permission slip. Think about who Solomon was. He was a man who had built the most magnificent temple in the known world. He had navigated incredibly complex political alliances. He had accumulated wealth beyond measure. He had spent his entire life being watched, being judged, being measured by his achievements. He was the ultimate performer on the world's largest stage. And in Ecclesiastes 12, he is looking back at the sheer crushing exhaustion of all that performance. He is looking at the endless, relentless pursuit of validation, the desperate need to control how others perceived him, the heavy, suffocating armor of his own ego. And he is saying, you do not have to carry this anymore. When he talks about the silver cord snapping, when the illusions of youth fade and the physical energy required to maintain the facade begins to wane, it is not a punishment. It is a release. Solomon was actively stripping away the exhausting burden of performing under the sun. He was saying that after a certain point, when you reach the autumn of your life, you are formally discharged. You are no longer required to care about the expectations of people who do not actually matter. The social contract that forces you to pretend, to strive, to impress, it expires. This hit me so hard, I actually had to stand up again. I pushed my chair back, walked to the window, and just stared out into the dark street for a long time. I realized that what I was feeling, this deep, aching desire to stop impressing people, this urge to just drop the social mask and be left alone, was not a sign of giving up. It was not a failure of character. It was the natural, intended progression of a fully lived human life. It was as if an ancient king was reaching across 3,000 years to tell me, you can put the armor down now. The war is over. I needed to know if I was just projecting my own relief onto the text. So I started looking into how other ancient traditions understood this specific shift in a person's life. There is an ancient rabbinic text compiled around the 2nd century called Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers. It maps out the stages of a person's life, year by decade. And it says explicitly that at age 60, a person reaches the stage of ziknah. Now, normally we just translate that as old age. But here is the fascinating part. The scholars who commented on this text for centuries did not interpret this word as just physical aging. They read the word zaken, elder, as an acronym, a specific phrase, Zeich Shekana Chochma. This means the one who has acquired wisdom. And how do they define this wisdom? It is absolutely not about knowing more facts. It is not about having a larger vocabulary or a longer resume. It is about a fundamental structural shift in what you value. It is the exact moment when the need for external validation drops away. The moment when you stop competing for status, stop trying to manage everyone's perception of you, and finally anchor yourself in your own internal peace. They were naming the exact relief I have been searching for. They were saying that at 60, society's claim on your ego officially expires. You are formally discharged from the battlefield of public opinion. You are no longer expected to prove anything. You have acquired the wisdom to know that the game itself is rigged, and the only way to win is to simply stop playing. I started looking outside of ancient texts. I wanted to see if this was happening right now. And I realized I was not alone in this feeling, not by a long shot. I found entire communities online, thousands upon thousands of people crossing the threshold of 60, sharing this exact same revelation. There is a whole culture developing right now of people who are explicitly abandoning the weight of other people's perceptions. They talk about a culture of simply not caring anymore. But it is not a negative, destructive apathy. That is what I had gotten wrong. It is a profoundly positive, life-affirming reduction of stress. They talk about the immense physical relief of walking away from arguments they used to fight to the death. The sheer joy of declining social invitations they used to feel obligated to accept. The freedom of letting someone else be wrong without feeling the need to correct them. The liberation of realizing that the sky will not fall, the world will not end, if you just stop pretending to care about things that drain your soul. I thought about a psychological framework developed in the 1950s, a very famous model of the stages of human psychosocial development. It notes that around the age of 60, we enter a final, critical tension, the conflict between ego integrity and despair. Ego integrity means letting go. It means releasing the desperate, childish need to prove yourself. It means letting go of the need to control outcomes, to demand that the world recognize your achievements. It is the profound acceptance of your life exactly as it is, without the need for an audience to applaud it. Ego integrity means looking back at the totality of your choices, the triumphs, the massive failures, the compromises, the loves you lost and the things you built, and saying, "This was mine." It means you stop trying to edit your past to make it sound better at dinner parties. It means you no longer feel the compulsion to aggressively curate your legacy. You are whole in and of yourself, completely independent of whether anyone else understands you. Despair, on the other hand, comes from holding on too tight. Despair is what happens when you refuse to drop the mask, when you keep trying to play a young person's game of status and validation, exhausting yourself to impress people who are not really looking anyway. Despair is the bitterness of demanding respect that you feel you are owed, instead of resting in the respect you have for yourself. Letting go of what people think is not becoming bitter. It is the literal clinical definition of psychological success. I thought about the brilliant actor, Daniel Day-Lewis. He was famous for his intense, obsessive, immersive performances. He won 3 Academy Awards. He was universally respected at the absolute pinnacle of his profession. The world demanded more from him. And then, right at the age of 60, shortly after finishing a massive film, he simply walked away. He retired, not because he lost his talent, not because he was forced out, but because he consciously, deliberately chose to leave behind the immense crushing pressure of public expectation. He dropped his work identity, an identity that most people would kill for, to prioritize his own private peace. He looked at the performance, he looked at the expectations of millions of people, and he said, "I am no longer required to do this." He understood what Solomon understood. But understanding this intellectually, reading it in a book or observing it in a famous actor is one thing. Feeling it in your own bones, applying it to your own life, that is something else entirely. And this is where I have to admit what this discovery has cost me. I entered this research 12 years ago as an academic. I was looking at ancient texts from a safe, analytical distance. I was dissecting sociology and theology, categorizing ancient human behavior like a biologist looking at cells under a microscope. There is no distance anymore. I cannot read these texts as a researcher anymore. I emerge from this study tonight as someone to whom this directly, urgently applies. And what I lost tonight, what I can never get back, is the comforting illusion that my exhaustion was just a temporary phase. I lost the belief that if I just rested for a weekend, if I just took a short vacation, I could put the heavy armor back on and keep performing for the crowd. I lost the innocent belief that caring about what the academic establishment thinks of me is a noble pursuit. I cannot unsee this. I cannot unknow that the performance is completely optional, and because I know it is optional, I can never force myself to do it with the same conviction again. The next time I'm standing in a hallway at a conference, listening to someone try to prove their importance, I will not be able to fake the smile. The mask has cracked, and I cannot put it back together. I am going to have to change how I live. Remember when I said I thought my father was losing his edge? Remember how I judged him for refusing to debate me at the dinner table after he turned 60? How I thought his silence was a sign of intellectual decay? I had it entirely, spectacularly backwards. I was right that he had changed, but I was wrong, so deeply, embarrassingly wrong about what that change meant. He was not surrendering. He had not lost his intellect. He had just acquired the wisdom to know that proving he was right was no longer worth the cost of his peace. He was looking at his ambitious, argumentative, arrogant son, and he was choosing silence because he no longer needed my validation to know who he was. He didn't need to win the argument to feel secure in his own skin. He was not giving up. He was finally free. I think about my mother back in Nsukka in Nigeria. She is a respected elder in her community now, and the way people treat her is completely different from when she was 40. She is no longer expected to perform the relentless, exhausting roles of organizing, pleasing, accommodating everyone else's needs. She speaks less than she used to, but when she does speak, everyone in the room stops to listen. Her authority does not come from how much she does. It does not come from how hard she tries to impress people. It comes from who she has become. She embodies that ancient, profound definition of the elder, the one who has acquired wisdom, the one who has stepped off the battlefield. King Solomon was not warning us about the end of life. He was giving us the ultimate, divine permission to enjoy the time we have left, entirely free from the crushing weight of other people's opinions. After 60, King Solomon said, "You are no longer required to do this. You are no longer required to care. You do not have to explain your choices to people committed to misunderstanding you. You do not have to maintain a flawless, energetic image for a society that only values youth. You do not have to win the argument. You do not have to attend the function. You do not have to carry the heavy, useless baggage of caring what the neighbors or your colleagues, or even your younger relatives think about how you choose to spend your days. It is not giving up. It is arriving." I am 57. I still have 3 years before I officially cross that specific chronological threshold. But sitting here tonight, looking at these ancient words, feeling the exhaustion deep in my bones, I think I am going to start practicing a little early. I think I am going to start putting the armor down today. I know there are a lot of people watching this who are right on this edge, or who have already crossed it. If this video brought you some clarity, if it gave words to an exhaustion you have been feeling, or even just offered a sense of relief and permission, consider using the Super Thanks button. This channel takes hundreds of hours of research to maintain. It takes a toll, and your support is exactly what allows me to keep sitting in this study at 2 in the morning, finding these stories, translating these texts, and bringing them directly to you. You are not just a viewer of this channel. You are the reason these ancient, vital conversations are still alive in the modern world. I do not have all the answers. I am still figuring this out myself. I am still learning how to let go. So tell me, am I exaggerating this? Am I just trying to justify my own tiredness? Tell me your own moment when you realized you could just stop pretending to care. Leave a comment down below, because I genuinely want to know how you handled it. I need to know what it looks like on the other side.